Hello, and welcome back to my reading of my book, Breadman. If you're just tuning in, I've already read chapters 1 through 6 on my channel before, and today I'm actually going to read 2 chapters, 7 and 8, because 7 on its own is fine. However, you might be a little bit confused as to how it all relates to the chapters before it and where it's going to go from there. So I'm going to read chapter 7 and 8 because 8 offers a little bit of an explanation as to what's going on and where we're going to go from here. Chapter 7. David was worn out of all the running. He did not even know where he was. The last place that he actually remembered was the bank in Kansas. After running down a long hallway, David finally ran into what looked like the heart of a 19th century city. He looked around at all the horse carriages walking down the dirt-covered streets. He looked at the bars with the swinging doors. This must be a dream, David thought, as he backed into an alleyway. He looked down at what he was wearing, a black t-shirt and blue jeans. That's exactly what I'm wearing. This would not end well, and he knew it. He was startled when he heard a door open from behind him. Looking behind him, he saw a boy about his age. He was about the same shape and size as David. He couldn't believe what he was about to do. He quickly ran to the boy carrying the garbage and tapped his shoulder. The boy turned around and David met the boy's face with his fist. The boy went down in an instant. He didn't know what hit him. David did. David finished putting on the boy's clothes. Looking down at what he was wearing now reminded him of pictures in history books. Baggy white shirt tucked into short pants. What disturbed him the most was wearing the tights. He placed the jacket on, placed the round hat atop his head, and headed for the city again. He quickly walked to the bar with the swinging doors. As soon as he walked in, everyone turned to look at him. They all went back to their own business, and David took a seat at the bar. The bartender was cleaning a glass with a worn-out rag when he noticed David. He set the glass and rag down and crossed his arms. "What do you have?" "I'll just have water," David replied. The bartender snorted and filled a glass of water and set it before David. "Haven't seen you around these parts," the bartender said, eyeing the boy. Taking a sip of his drink, he replied, "I'm new here." Once again, the bartender snorted and went back to cleaning the glasses.
"What's your business here, boy?"
A voice behind him snarled. David turned around to a large man with a black beard. He also noted the man's posse of 19th century gangsters. David slowly turned back the way he was before.
"I'm talking to you, boy."
"I'm just passing through," David replied, looking down at his water.
"Then pass, boy."
David knew better than to argue with the town bully, so he got off his seat. The man grabbed David's shoulder, spun him around, and punched him in the face. David grabbed his face in pain. The man grabbed David again, ready for another punch, when a man stepped through the doors. "That's enough, Hank!" The burly man took his hands off David and turned to his posse.
"All right, boss, let's go."
He turned to the man at the door.
"See you around, Sheriff."
As Hank brushed the sheriff's shoulder, the sheriff walked towards David. "Are you all right?" the sheriff asked. "I'll be fine. I haven't seen you before. My name is Buck Willingham. I am the sheriff in this here town." The sheriff was young. He had brownish blonde hair and a caring smile. He reached his hands out for David. "David Larson." He shook Buck's hand. "Well, listen, my wife Elizabeth will be cooking up a fine meal. If you're interested, our house is just past that old barn down yonder." Sheriff Willingham pointed towards a run-down barn. The sheriff continued speaking. "You can come join us if you like." "Thank you, I shall think about it." The sheriff nodded and walked away. David walked back down the dirt street and found a small boy selling bakery. "You, sir," the boy called out. "Would you like to buy some fine baked bread? My father made this just the past hour." The boy pointed to the bakery store. That's when David remembered the pills. It's been hours since he should have been taking another pill. He checked his pockets. Nothing. He must have lost the pills when he was shot. Then he remembered something. The doctor told him he survived because he had something in his system. It had to be the bread that he ate at the restaurant. Bread isn't bad like his father told him all these years ago. It's a good thing. It saved his life. "Yes, I will buy your bread." "What do you want, mister?" "Everything," David replied. "I will buy your whole basket." The boy's eyes widened with excitement. "Wow, golly, that'll be 35 cents, mister." David chuckled at the price. He paid the boy, and the boy went running off to show his father. David looked down at the fresh bakery he was holding. He took one of the breadsticks he had and ate it. Every feeling in his body felt a great sensation. He then ate the rest of the bread in a little bit under a minute. He was amazed at how fast He could eat a basket full of bread. He looked down at his leg that the fake parents cut. It instantly healed in seconds. David was amazed. Maybe he was a super soldier. There's no way. David found the sheriff's home and left a note on his door that he had to leave and he couldn't stay. He had to find out what was going on. He got back to the town and he was amazed at how quiet it was at night. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. At first, he thought it was Hank ready to pick another fight, but it wasn't. It was someone he hasn't seen before. It was a woman.
David Larson?
Asked the woman. Yeah.
Please come with me.
David was at a loss of words when the woman pushed him into the back of a horse carriage. For about 5 minutes, all he knew was that the roads were real bumpy. He didn't want to ask what was going on. Finally, the carriage stopped and the woman came into view again.
Please step out of the carriage.
As soon as he did so, he noticed a car stationed behind a large tree. It looked like they were in the forest. That explains the bumpy roads, David thought. When David got into the car, the woman took off her cowboy hat and pulled up her sleeve. He saw a watch. She took his hand and clicked a button. The next thing David knew, his insides felt like they were being ripped apart from the inside. Then everything went white. Chapter 8. The whiteness that filled the car quickly became a feeling. The churning of his insides faded away. It felt like he was in heaven. There was no pain. It felt like he was floating. He was as light as a feather falling down the light air. Wait, David thought. That's when he noticed that he was falling, quicker and quicker, steadily increasing. He felt the weight pulled down on him as he was getting heavier by the second. Finally, he crashed down. Got him, a voice said. He opened his eyes to a black man taking off his stethoscope. David could clearly see the man was a doctor. White lab coat, stethoscope, he even had the toolkit with him. "Ha ha! Welcome back, my man," he said to David. He then turned around to the lady who brought David into the car. "What did I say? I told you I could get him. Don't you doubt me again." He laughed and got up. He grabbed his toolkit and began to leave the door of the office building that they were currently in. Just before he left, the friendly doctor gave David a wink, pointing his finger at him. Then he was gone. All the time, the mysterious lady was peering at David. Okay, what's going on? Time to get some exposition.
I am Special Agent Susan Mulligan, NSA. We were informed that there had been a breach in the time continuum. You were illegally transported through a fourth dimension.
David paused in contemplation. Finally, he resumed speaking. Exactly how long have you been able to travel time?
Shortly after the U.S. Department of Organic Matter found a substance to alter living tissue to create super soldiers, they told us what was in the substance. From there, we created a time continuum.
So you've been traveling time for years?
Precisely, but the public should never hear of this. There would be riots around the globe. Now, the people who kidnapped you, we need to know what they wanted.
I was in an amnesic state. They introduced themselves as my parents. I went along with them. Shortly after they left the hospital, they pulled a gun on me, and they wanted to steal powers from me as if I was a super soldier.
You are.
Agent Mulligan shot back. Agent Mulligan, I think I would know if I was a super soldier.
So your father decided to go with the pills then?
What? How do you know about the pills?
Mr. Larson, I know all about you. I know all of the super soldiers.
I'm not a super soldier, David shouted back.
Yes, you are. You may not want to accept it, but you are. Your father created the formula for super soldiers. He also had you take the serum. The test came back negative. Your father was fired because of it. Shortly after his serum was submitted, we found out that the serum he created was successful. The only problem was bread had to be in the system. So you see, Mr. Larson, you are a super soldier. My question is, can you cope with that fact?
David slumped back in his seat. Slowly, he nodded his head.
All right, here's what we need you to do. The man and woman who kidnapped you, their names are Joseph Zimmer and Margaret Smith. They shot you at the Bank of America. It was all a staged robbery. They staged it to get you.
How in the world would they possibly know I would be at a certain bank at a certain time?
They were actually stationed in an abandoned warehouse. They were monitoring super soldiers such as yourself, and once they came across a super soldier with a distinct difference from the average soldier, they needed a closer look. When they saw that you would go to a bank, they knew that that was their chance. They used the watch that they stole with the time continuum built inside to get to you. Here's the thing. You may not know this, but to everybody else in the world, you've been gone for a year. No one knows what happened to you. You were declared dead.
What? What about my parents? David said, now sitting on the edge of his seat.
They strongly believe you're dead too, although they try to keep hope up just in case.
David covered his face in his hands. What was he supposed to do now? All he wanted to do was go home. What do you want from me?
Mr. Larson, we need you to catch the person who is behind all this. The man who hired Joseph and Margaret.
Why me? David asked. Why do you need me to do it? Can't you find some other super soldier to do it?
You'll see in a minute.
Susan stood from her seat and said,
Come with me, please.
David got up as well and followed her over to a metal desk with a flat computer screen, keyboard, and mouse. She sat in the desk chair and turned to David. She motioned to a metal fold-up chair on the opposite side of her desk.
Sit down.
David sat. He didn't know where she was going with this.
For almost the entire time you've been missing, we've been trying to find you. It wasn't until recently that we got footage of the perpetrator hacking the NSA computer network.
David heard the woman click a button and the printer buzzed to life.
The files that he stole from the network told him how to create the watches that they had. The NSA network was also how Joseph and Margaret tracked the super soldiers. Unfortunately, we never had any footage of them. The photo you're about to see was taken at a local Starbucks. He was on his laptop.
The page finished printing.
Go on, Mr. Larson. Have a look.
David reached over and grabbed the paper laying face down on the printer. He flipped the page over and quickly scanned it. He didn't think he would actually notice anything odd, yet he did. His eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe what he was looking at.
What's the matter?
Agent Mulligan asked. She could clearly see that something was terribly wrong with David. He couldn't keep his eyes off the paper. He just shook his head.
Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson?
Susan watched as David slowly looked up at her. His jaw dropped in shock. David looked her right in the eyes and said, I know him. And end of chapter 8 now. So a couple of inside knowledge here. The names, Joseph Zimmer. Two of my best friends growing up, Joe Flatt, Will Zimmer. I just combined those together. Margaret Smith, I'm not entirely sure. I did have a female friend around the same time with the first name of M and last name of Smith. I could have just changed the name for, whatever reason. The main thing that I wanted to talk about with these two chapters is time travel. Time travel is a big theme in the book itself, and the time watches were also a big plot device in the short films that I made with my brother. Here's a little snippet of that.
He went back in time! That was a time watch on his hand! Oh, here's one on mine. I think I'll order it. That was best.
So a lot of what happens in this book happened in those short films, and I just kind of upped the ante to be more serious. And anytime something in the book was taken from those short films, I'll kind of show you a little clip of that just to kind of give you an idea of where I took it from. Also, if you go all the way back to chapter 6 when David woke up in the hospital, the biggest thing was I had a comment, and you know who you are, that asked, why didn't the hospital have security? Why didn't they check IDs? Because later you found out that David was in the distant past. There was no security. There was no IDs even. You also noticed that in the hospital, the room was incredibly blank. There wasn't a lot of things there at all. There was an IV bag, and that's it. And then when they rushed David out of the hospital, they're in a hurry, not just because they're kidnapping him, but because they have a car in the parking lot and nobody had ever seen a car before. So you have all these curious onlookers looking at them because they're in the past in this futuristic vehicle that doesn't exist yet. I didn't exactly explain that in the exposition. I probably should have, but that's what's going on here. That should explain a little bit of the confusion of what's going on in chapter 6, the weirdness of chapter 7, and now you know. A big theme is time travel. So if you guys like that, let me know what you thought. Tell me if you want to hear chapter 9 and above. Peace out.